She's a former director of the Tai Chi Center in Madison, Wisconsin, former owner of Tai Chi Health, which trained and certified teachers in her programs nationally. Her primary lineage teachers include Ben Lowe, William Chen, Maggie Newman, Lindsay Williams, and Kim Kasselberger. She's also attended workshops with Tam Gibbs, Ed Young, Robert Smith, Abraham Liu, Fred Lehrman, Judith Weaver, Batan Faigu, and Qigong teachers include Wei Mu Zhu, Li Zhongfeng, and Paul Gallagher. Her website and contact information, again, are in the chat. She's a pioneer in integrating Tai Chi into medical model exercise programs, including ROM dance program, original Tai Chi fundamentals program in 1976, and the Tai Chi fundamentals adapted program in 2015. She's developed books, DVDs, and has collaborated with health professionals in developing training courses, instructional materials, and certification for all the programs. Her Tai Chi Fundamentals Adapted program is featured in the evidence-based Tai Chi Prime class series. And again, for more on those, you can get them in the drop-down menus at taichihealth.com. She has a BA in psychology from DePaul University, MA in education from Claremont Graduate University, and has been certified by Ben Lowe and William Chen as a Yang-style lineage teacher. Tricia, if you want to go ahead and take it.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Michael and Redmond, for making this all possible. And Michael, I really enjoyed your presentation on the 8 ways. I'm very enthusiastic about it. I was introduced to it years ago, but have not practiced it very much. So I think I will. I'm thrilled to be here to share with you my life work. And this will be largely a PowerPoint, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to look at the visuals as well as hear me, because there'll be a lot more information on the PowerPoint. A little personal disclosure: I was a kind of a wild and crazy child, and by the time I was 11, I had sustained neck and head injuries that have impacted my entire life, and also given me tremendous empathy with people who have pain and physical limitation. By the time I started Taiji at 26, I was unable to run or jump, which meant that I've never been able to do anything aerobic or anything that jars my body at all. And so I have to say, during the last discussions, when people are talking about being on the wall at Shizhong, I always just hold my head. You know, I've never been able to do anything of that sort. So discovering Taiji was a godsend for me. Okay, here we go. Let's get the screen share. Whoops. Oh dear, now I have to get this to work. Okay. So we will be going through this at a rather fast trot. I'm trying to get 50 years of experience into a 20-minute presentation. So these are some of the programs that have helped develop with the idea of making Taiji accessible to everyone. So in drinking water and remembering source, I need to really honor and acknowledge my first husband, Robert Yu. He's the one that got me to Taiwan to start with, and then became fluent in Mandarin. And then he was very involved in learning Xingyi and Bagua from Hong Yixiong. And as you can see from here, he spent a lot of time at it. And also he ultimately introduced me to my Taoist teacher, Liu Peizhong, and ultimately gave me the privilege of being able to study with him, because Liu Peizhong did not accept non-Chinese students. Liu Peizhong was a contemporary of Zhen Manqing, although he was 20 years older. And he was the president of the Taiwan Taiji Chuan Association when I was studying with him. And I was a card carrying member. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble forwarding here. Okay. I ultimately became the only non-Chinese student of Master Liu Peizhong. He was a very famous Taoist teacher. He had extraordinary skills. He could move people without touching them. He was legendary. And the takeaway that I got from being there, learning traditionally, being very quiet, never asking questions, being the proper Chinese student, was the Dao Gong meditation. And we know Qi Gong is, Qi cultivation, and Dao Gong is cultivating harmony with the larger universe. And so what I learn and practice from that has been at the core of my Taiji practice for my entire life. It has to do with attuning with the greater whole, finding whatever feels like oneness, which is heaven, bringing that through the body into the earth, and then that influences us as humans. Fast forward to 1974, I immediately became a Taiji teacher. There was great demand in Madison, Wisconsin for Taiji, and there were, of course, no masters. And so I began teaching there, and a shout out to Fred Lehrman, who made one of his life missions bringing the Zhenmencheng form outside of New York into the Midwest. And he did a wonderful job of that and helped create community among a number of schools that were established in the Midwest. My own Taiji center focused on traditional Zhenmencheng style Taiji, William Chen's sword form, because he taught it openly, and then the Taoist meditation and Qigong. In an effort to bring teachers, I attended workshops. I brought many teachers into the Taiji Center, and then organized the Benlo Midwest Camp in 1980, which really helped network many of the Midwest and also the Boulder area Taiji students. Pat Colati, who I met in the very beginning, became a dear long-term friend, and I will be mentioning her several times, and she ultimately took over the Benlo Midwest camps. Simultaneously to all this traditional training and teaching, I collaborated with an occupational therapist at a hospital in Madison, and we developed the range of motion dance, or the ROM dance. And just to put all this in perspective, in 1981, there was no such thing as the mind-body connection in terms of the scientific model or the medical model. And so I was working with combining range of motion for arthritis and other applications, as you can see here, and introducing some Taiji principles to the process. And these are some of the principles of the ROM dance. What happened, the ROM dance kind of exploded in the early 80s. And so I was, in addition to teaching classes, I was training people nationally. And they were physical and occupational therapists, and then other people that worked in healthcare and long-term care. And I developed a tremendous admiration for the PTs and the OTs, and learned a lot from them. And my experience with them was carried into into the way that I taught, the way that I thought. And some of the basic differences between learning Taiji, as I had, very traditionally, and people that are trained in anatomy and physiology, is Taiji is basically the process of following the leader and trying to do what the teacher can do. In therapy, you're starting with the condition of yourself, let's say, and they assess how you're structured, and we're all structured very differently, and what your capabilities are. And then they always move, just like Michael Stetson said earlier, from simple to complex. And the traditional Taiji forms were not designed with that in mind. And so this influenced everything that I ever did ever since. Meanwhile, I was studying with Ben Lowe, and he was very generous in endorsing the Ram dance as a Taiji kindergarten. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, back at the Taiji Center, I had a phenomenal number of students. It was an incredible opportunity for learning how people move, what problems people have, what barriers they have. I felt like it was just this ongoing lesson in seeing how people best can learn Taiji and what parts of Taiji sometimes make it very difficult for people. Now, when I first started teaching, all of the students were in the, 18 to 29. And then as the years progressed, they got a little bit older. But in 1996, I was following the research all the time. The research, a big study came out with Taiji and falls. And the population studied were people that were 65 and over. And that began a tsunami of older adults coming into the Taiji Center and not being able to do the Zhenmenqing form. And so I developed the Taiji fundamentals in 1996 with a lot of influence from the way that health professionals do their programs. And it's a gateway program to the Zhenmenqing form, and it's also a standalone program. And we would recommend at the Taiji Center that people first take a Taiji fundamentals class and then do the Zhenmenqing form. And the feedback that we got almost universally was it helped so much. The basic program elements of Taiji fundamentals that I will go over with you are there's 3 elements of the training. One is mind-body skills training, basic moves, building blocks for learning Taiji, and a modified form. So the mind-body skills, we don't need to go into too much. It's just basically the mind-body integration elements of Taiji that ultimately lead to a better understanding of the energetic components, flow and chi, and being able to sense chi, not only when you're standing still, but when you're moving. And so the mind-body skills were integrated, of course, into all aspects of the trainings. And then here, these are the basic moves. And once again, they go from simple to complex. And what we're doing here, instead of starting people with form actually is very complex to learn, even a very short form or a very simplified form, because your arms and legs are doing things, you're having to coordinate many, many different things. And so the basic moves are all done standing, and all the movements are repetitive. And you can see here, we train people to stand, bend your knees and keep your body upright, shift your weight. And finally, after a few weeks, you're ready to even think about doing a Taiji stance. And then after that, we move into what I call the Taiji fold. It is that fold when we're talking about turning the waist. You can feel the fold, at your hip joint. And so go from standing all the way at the very end to a position where you're doing what we normally do in traditional Taiji. So these building blocks have a number of purposes. And I'm just going to go right down to the training protocol, is we always teach the trunk alignment over the legs. We need to get in our bodies, get well grounded in order to be able to relax. And then you add the arm movement. So that's a protocol that we've used in all of our training. The other aspect is coming from, as you know, somebody with chronic pain. There's many applications for Taiji. There's push hands, and there's the martial arts applications for which Taiji was, originally designed. But it turns out Taiji is the supreme ultimate. It applies to everything we do. It applies to everything from the way that we think, we breathe, we stand, we sit, we walk, we lift, we push, and we pull. And so our emphasis is on application to daily activities. So the basic moves training sequence, this is an example of what we do in the first part. Start by standing, move into all these different trainings, keeping the body upright, and we end up in the Taiji stance. That's part one. And this is an example of an element, a very core element to the training that sometimes it gets on the back burner if you're just jumping right into learning a form. And that is, you always have to have your center of mass over your base of support. And our center of mass is exactly where the lower dantian is. I mean, energetically, it's the lower dantian. Physiologically, it's the center of mass. And working with the pelvis, I mean, I don't know if you can see my hands here, but we do lots of exercises to try to isolate the pelvis, hip up, hip down, is it level? And we want to maintain that throughout all the movements. Unless you're well rooted, there's it's very difficult to relax. So in the Taiji fundamentals, we begin by having people stand and then keep your body upright as you bend and straighten your knees. And right there, people will lean forward, they'll lean back, they'll hike up a hip, they'll hike up another hip. And so it takes a while to develop this. And this has everything to do with developing root. Okay, so then we take it to one level more complex, from being able to shift your weight, or be able to bend and straighten your knees, keeping your body upright, being able to shift your weight laterally, and then be able to maintain an aligned and a relaxed pelvis as you shift your weight. And ideally, when all that weight is on one foot, your center of mass, your lower dantian, is lined up over your bubbling well, your tailbone is lined up over your heel. And that's all jolly. That's great. Once we can find the alignment, and then the next step is relax. You've got to be able to relax your pelvis in order to get any root. So it's a training. And then next, we take that same principle with the kicks. And I would invite you to look at yourself in a mirror, and as you especially do the kicks, because many experienced practitioners will hike up the hip of the kicking leg. And what's happening there is your center of mass is no longer over your base of support in your foot. Your center of mass is over nothing. And then you're compensating by tensing up somewhere. So this is an example of kind of the sequence of training, the focus of the training, which is the core. It's not the depths and all these incredible things that we hear that the masters can do. This is basic Taiji that's essential for anything, whether it's just being able to, function or get into some of these more higher level skills. So there's 3 parts to the training. First of all, we're learning the Taiji stance, as I mentioned. The second part, we're learning to turn, and you really can't turn effectively. You cannot turn, quote, the waist, which I think we've talked about is a mistranslation, the yao, but if the pelvis isn't relaxed and aligned, there is no way to really get an effective turn of the waist. And then in part 3, we get into the single weighted stance and then into stuff that looks more like traditional Taiji. So that's the basic moves. There's mind body skills, basic moves building block, and the form. And here's the question I have gotten many, many times is, well, why can't we just do the first third of the Junman Qing form? If you can, that's great. I mean, most of us could if we started when we were younger. But as we age, the mind, this is Taoist, perspective, the mind and the body start to, disconnect. And so here are some of the elements that are in the first third of the form that are way too challenging for many, many people. And the first of all, preparation beginning, and then you turn that foot 90 degrees, which can throw your left knee out. And for some people, they'll actually start arching their back. And that happens in a number of moves. And then in order to get into the 70-30 stance, there's a heel pivot. Well, that heel pivot was nothing when I learned it at 26. But again, I'm sure that if you've worked with seniors, that heel pivot is very challenging. Folding onto the front gua. So you do that, for example, after the left ward off, and you're getting ready to do the right ward off, and you fold, you shift forward, and you fold into that front left gua. And then you do the same thing before you do the rollback. That's very extremely challenging. And then the other one is the pigeon-toed position, or the internal rotation of single whip. You've seen what people do with that, right? Arch your back, stick your rear end out. And actually the first third has very complex choreography. And so the Taiji fundamentals form deletes those things. The feet never exceed 30 to 45 degrees, no heel pivots, no folding onto the front gua, and no internal rotation. And all of those things, eliminating all of those things does not interfere, for example, with Ben Lowe's 5 principles or with any of the really important benefits of Taiji. These are all choreography that, that we don't need if we can't do it right. It does teach essential skills and, of course, moves from simple to complex. So very briefly then, the basic moves all relate to the form. The basic moves and the form all are in what they call a developmental sequence, or a simple to complex, or a developmental progression. Those are all the terms that the health professionals use. And they correspond with each other. So part 1 corresponds with part 1 of the form, which does a lot with in the 70-30 stance. Part 2 of the basic moves relates to part 2 of the form, which is more focused on now the folding, the turning of the waist. And part 3, relates to the single weighted stances and also to the movements that are more characteristic of traditional Taiji. So in 2003, I was, one of the highlights of my career was writing a book with DK Publishing that was in 12 languages. And William C.C. Chen really got the Taiji fundamentals, and he endorsed it, which was a tremendous blessing. Ben Lowe took quite a bit longer and had a liver transplant, and then he began to see, oh, you can't really do the first third. Also, Pat Kalati, who was always good in talking with him about these things, which I wasn't. So moving on now to 2015, the Taiji fundamentals is taught to anybody that wants to learn it, to Taiji people, to health professionals. It's taught in the VAs. It's presented at physical therapy conferences. And lots of people were starting to adapt it for people that weren't really able to do something standing without support. And so in 2015, with collaboration with Pat Colati again, and with PTs and OTs who helped with the walker and the seated versions, I developed, it's called the Tai Chi Fundamentals Adapted Program that always has side support or some kind of support if you need it. The beauty of this is all three versions can be taught in the same class. And it's quite heartwarming, you know, people rolling in with their walkers or with, you know, in their wheelchairs, or people walking in independently, and all able to participate in the same group. So often there's a wheelchair class or a walker class, and bringing everybody together is wonderful for developing community. Both the original, so now the first Tai Chi Fundamentals program is called the original, and the adapted we offer training courses, instruction material, certification. And I haven't talked about this very much, but we have quite a relationship with healthcare professionals, and they can analyze it therapeutically, biomechanically, and they can actually document, especially the basic moves, for Medicare and insurance reimbursement. And onward once more. So 2015, the adapted program was developed, and in 2016, we were able to participate in a research project at the University of Wisconsin. And the name of this was a project using the Tai Chi Fundamentals Adapted Side Support Program, the one that you can have a chair by your side. They were studying a class series. So those are the researchers, and then I largely was the one who helped develop the curriculum. It's a 6-week series. It includes, we have warm-ups, very important warm-ups, the fundamentals, tea time for rest. It's an 1.5-hour class. And then we do seated Qigong and home practice coaching. And the home practice coaching, this would be a nice discussion for this group, is how do you get people to practice? The coaching piece was developed by one of the researchers, and it was extremely effective because within 6 weeks, 12 classes, the participants who were 65 and older had significant improvement in balance, cognitive function, strength, and mobility. And the program, it's a program, very, very structured, got this seal of approval from the National Council on Aging as a fall prevention program. Okay, so if you're interested in any of this, we would love to talk with you. I'm retired, although I'm glad to talk with you about anything. You can go to our website, taijihealth.com, and we have a number of drop-down menus, including, you know, Junmenqing lineage drop-down menu. But if you're interested in what we've just been discussing here, you can go to Tai Chi Fundamentals, Tai Chi Prime, and the training drop-down menus. And for more information, go to taijihealth.com, and we have lots and lots of information and a very enthusiastic group of instructors. So thank you so much, and I'm interested if you have any questions. And thank you so much for allowing me to present this.